and nothing else matters except improving your stand-up routine. Just work on your act and get better, and then allow the other things to kind of go in the flow.
Today I'm talking with Brad Kearns, New York Times bestselling author of 22 books, host of the Be Rad podcast, and the world-ranked Masters high jumper at 61, who reminded me that the best business advice and the best performance advice might actually be the same thing. Work on your act.
I guess we'll just start with, like, in terms of your daily operations and your daily work, what do you feel like is working really well for you right now?
Oh man, Shannon, that's such a tough question. Things are coming to mind that aren't working well, and one of them is I'm supposed to be a creator by name and biography, but we all are getting slammed with communication like never before. And at my age, I'm 61, so I can reference years and decades before we had mobile technology or nonstop internet connection, where I would head off to the library to work on my book and go to aisle 7, third shelf, and pick up a few books to read and take notes, and then sit down at my keyboard and have a very focused work experience. And nowadays, those things have left us behind, and it's difficult to get into that peak performance state, that deep work state, like Cal Newport's book talks about. And
Yeah.
so that's one that I'm trying to be more mindful and aware of, the need to disengage and work on something in a focused manner. And of course, I've been able to do that for a long time because I've written, I believe it's now 22 books, and they've pretty much been nonstop since 1995. I've been working on a book and thinking of a new book and starting that. So that's been a big chunk of my career, but it constantly gets pressurized from outside because that's
Mm.
not all I do. And I'd love to meet one of those writers that go off to their cabin and have a cup of coffee in the morning and sit down and write for 4 hours and then take an hour break for lunch and then write for 2.5 more. That's not me. I'm always juggling different plates, including trying to focus on a book. So that's a challenge these days.
Yeah. I think it's a challenge, like we were talking about earlier, for a lot of us, like all the information. I mean, I loved Deep Work by Cal Newport, and like, when do you, how do you, is that really even feasible anymore? And even the people who do that, like you said, go right for in their cabin, like, is that a day or is that a week? Because I just can't imagine being able to do that for longer than a week or two at a time, right? And so it's that condensed time that Cal really talked about, which even that sounds amazing. And I struggle with that as well. So,
One of the great insights that I pulled from that book too is that when you are capable of operating in this manner, you get a massive competitive edge in the workplace because everyone is just scrambling and trying to stay on top of their
yeah.
emails and their instant messaging. And so we're all just kind of like throwing the hot potato back and forth. But someone who
Mm-hmm.
can step up and create something of beauty and value and uniqueness, they can leverage that. And so, boy, I really appreciate that insight. And I'm
Yeah.
also thinking of Jerry Seinfeld's famous quote that has gotten around when a young comic comes up and asks him for advice about how to make it big. Should I go to Hollywood? Should I try to do a show? And his answer is work on your act. That is his number one piece of advice that he dispenses
Mm.
over and over. And nothing else matters except improving your stand-up routine. And we could all take that quote and apply it to whatever we're doing. Just work on your act and get better, and then allow the other things to kind of go in the flow.
Be in the flow. Those doors tend to open when you have something really unique and amazing to offer people. They'll find you, right? And when we're so busy doing answering emails, it's really
Yeah,
hard to be
and what you
found.
just said is important for everyone to reflect on more because we're getting slapped around and lured into a lot of content and marketing messaging where, oh, forget all that stuff. You don't have to work hard and sweat over the
Mm.
details. Just try this new strategy, and you too can be driving around in an orange Lamborghini and making posts about how you went 10x in a short time because you tried something new and magical.
Yeah, sometimes that gets exhausting, right? So I asked you about daily operations and what works well, and you just jumped right to challenges because that's what was my next question anyway. So I love that. When it comes to money, what are some of either the biggest financial wins or challenges? And you don't have to get into specifics, but like, what have you done to have those wins in your business or
Well,
challenges?
I think the journey that I've had as a book author has been quite lengthy and quite arduous, as any writer might share. including not on that list of books that I mentioned or some that never got published, right? I mean, there's a lot of
Right.
wasted work and wasted effort, or writing a fantastic book and then it doesn't sell very well.
Mhm.
And I've been a long time writing partner with Mark Sisson, and we've had a great run publishing books in the primal paleo, keto diet world. And then all of a sudden, you'll have what we consider to be a masterpiece and proudly present it to Amazon.com page and the publishing world, and then the response isn't there. And so it's a challenge because I guess an actor would probably agree, like, there's a lot of potential dead ends where you have a big smash hit in Hollywood, you do two more movies, the third one is just torched by the critics, and then you're sitting home waiting for the phone to ring. And I think that's possibly something that a lot of writers can relate to, unless we're thinking of John Grisham's next book's probably not going to be a flop, or whoever that has a string of the Harry Potter book number 17 is also going to sell well. But for a lot of people that are in that content creation category, you never know what the next step is. And so I guess to answer your question, like what's worked well is me putting my head down and focusing on things that I really believe in and have a tremendous passion and interest to convey the message, and putting aside the economic consequences for a moment
Mm.
to be authentic and tell the story that I believe is important to tell, and of course promote the crap out of it and do all the right things and make all the right decisions. But if your starting point is, gee, how can I write a book to generate economic success and widespread readership? I would venture to say that that's a really difficult place to start, and you might get your butt kicked really bad. So you have to be true to yourself, and maybe your book is not going to be on the bestseller list, but if it impacts a certain number of lives, and even if it's 1,000 people, same with a podcast, like people might complain, like, yeah, I only have 1,000 downloads. Well, if you were invited to the community center in your town to a sold out crowd of 1,000 people to listen to you talk for an hour, it would be like a life changing. I got to get ready for this speech. The Rotary Club invited me to talk, and 1,000 people are coming, or 100 at the library. That's a huge deal for an author or whoever it might be. And so we have to think of just transitioning over to podcasts, because I do that too. Like if 100 people are listening to your show, that's a fantastic opportunity to connect with a huge audience, and you don't have to judge it against the million zillion downloads that all the hotshots express gratitude for to their listeners.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Brad. And I mean, a couple of things come to mind for me. Like, there are no overnight successes. There's just 10 years of work behind something that finally takes off, right? And the other one is like, I feel like every business owner, I even tell my young adult children, like, you have to go find the no's on your way to a yes, right? And so there may be flops of books. There may be podcasts that only have 100. Like you said, that's still 100 more than you have when you don't have a podcast. And just because you have one that flops doesn't mean the next one will. Like, you have to go through some of those to get to the ones that
Mm,
do take off and hit the New York Times bestsellers or whatever the goal is for you. So I love that.
mm.
So this is an interesting question, I think, for you, because you have been able to have an impact through all of your books. And we hear sometimes from health and wellness business owners, like, I can't be profitable because I have to make an impact on the people that I'm trying to serve. And they're trying to balance those two things, or maybe even put impact above profit. And I just wonder what you would say to somebody like that.
I've never heard that before. It doesn't make
Mm,
sense. Like when you have an
interesting.
impact, you
Yeah.
make a profit. I don't get it. How could those two be opposed?
Yeah, I mean, I personally feel like it's people who honestly don't have enough self-worth and can't price their services and
Mm,
understand that, yes, you do get to make an impact. And because of that, it's an energy exchange, right? You're giving somebody something that could change their life. Like, you deserve to be paid for that. You deserve to make a profit. And that doesn't mean it has to be an extraordinary, exorbitant profit. But at the same time, if you can help millions of people, why not, right?
yeah, and it's also when someone pays a fair price and when you charge a fair price, there's an inherent level of respect there in both directions. So I've made the mistake of like proudly offering up a book for free to someone, a signed copy at that. And but wait, they didn't ask me if they didn't say they were interested in reading it. And so like I'm not giving anything to anybody unless they
Right.
express tremendous interest. And then I would be happy to set you up with a bag of my protein and try it out because you're so interested in it and you've asked me 7 questions. That's the kind of people you want to form a relationship with. And so you can kind of weed out, let's say an example of like a trainer or a coach, and you offer the first month free or something, and someone takes advantage and then says, I don't think I'm going to do it after getting a month of free consultation. It's a lose-lose in both directions. And so I've come across people that have tried to rip me off and charge way too much, and they weren't that great at what they did, but they were great at pitching themselves, and like, all right, enough of that. But I also
Yeah.
find that people who are really confident and know that their price will bring tremendous value, it's like, sure, I'm going to sign up for that every single time, even if it's a bit of a hit,
Sure. I also
including lawyers. I'm just thinking of, I'm immersed in a lawsuit now, and I'm on my third lawyer who is a superstar. She's a neighbor of yours in Chicago. But the first
mhm.
two were absolutely pathetic and committed malpractice to the extent that, to my extreme detriment and extreme cost to unwind the
Mm,
bad work that they did. And
right.
it's like, wait a second. Part of my decision to choose them at the outset was they build a significant amount lower than a top tier lawyer, which is tremendously expensive, right? We're talking
Mhm.
600, 800. One person was 1,200 bucks an hour. So, gee, 575 sounds much better, but a really crappy lawyer at 575 an hour is much worse than a baller at 1,200 who writes one letter and changes the course of your case.
3 hours of that 575 for something once somebody can do in 1200, it doesn't make it cheaper anymore, right? That's the other thing there.
Hmm.
I also kind of, to go back to your point, like people who get those free things, they're not invested. And then I have always found that their results are not as good as people who are invested and who put down, even if it's $20 for a book, right? Like you're invested, then you spend time to read that book. All of a sudden, like it usually lasts a little bit longer. Like I feel like your education lasts a little bit longer, and the results usually are better just because you're more invested in that.
Yeah.
So totally get that. I know we talked earlier about some trends in the health and wellness space, but I'm wondering like what you're seeing is having the most impact on the work that you're doing as far as trends in that space.
Oh, I think one thing I'm seeing in the diet realm is a drifting toward sensibility rather than extremism. And all these fad diets that I have written about and been immersed in and talked about and done online courses about, they have great success behind them and great scientific research. But then when you go back and look in real life and what's sustainable and what's going to allow someone to enjoy their meal times and enjoy long-term progress without the stress of doing things that are like boot camp style regimens or extreme restriction diets such as heavy duty fasting or ketogenic where you're limiting your carbs extremely or doing plant-based and systematically restricting some of the most nutritious foods on the planet or most of them. All that kind of stuff has turned into kind of folly, and especially someone like me who's immersed deeply into it and watching trends carefully and all that, I think we're now kind of growing past all the gimmicks and the hype and realizing that the number one objective would be, hey, just clean up your act. Speaking of Jerry Seinfeld, work on your act. Clean up your act around your house. Let's look in your cupboards and throw this crap away that's processed, chemical laden, nutrient deficient, and just try to focus on eating natural, nutritious foods that have nutrient density and all that kind of thing. And once you do that, a lot of experts contend that you're 80% of the way there to great success. And then, sure, if you want to fine tune at the top of that pyramid, and I have hours of podcast content talking about how many grams of protein per pound of body weight and all that great stuff that people are really interested in. But a lot of people kind of jump to the hype and the
Mm,
extremism to make a radical lifestyle change instead of just saying, hey, why don't, instead of driving over to the fast food joint, why don't you buy a burger at the store and cook that up yourself kind of thing and simplify. So getting away from the gimmicks, I think, is a good trend. I'm thinking of that in the diet realm. And I guess if I can ramble on more, like in the fitness world, what I'm seeing is a great trend is this demystifying and making the process of leading a healthy, fit, active, energetic lifestyle less complex. I like this idea about micro workouts, and those are brief
mm,
bursts of explosive effort around your home, taking breaks from the screen. And so you can
yeah.
stop for a moment and then rush up the staircase two or three times and then come back to your busy, important lifestyle. Same within the workplace. You can take a break from the screen, drop and do a set of 20 squats into your chair at your cubicle, even if you have no room or no implements. So these
Yeah.
little sprinkles of fitness throughout your day can have a massive impact. If we talk 365 days later on the show about how people implementing micro workouts have had fitness breakthrough, it's tremendous. And it kind of goes against all the heavy duty marketing and programming that you need to purchase this very expensive home unit or you need to join up and push yourself really hard on these exhaustive classes that might be too much for one to handle, especially if they're a novice. And I think the more we can get away from that and realize that fitness is little tiny habits that aren't exhausting and strenuous or high risk of injury or burnout. If you're coming into a life transition of moving into the next decade or whatever, the menopausal years where the women are wanting to change something and do something different, you don't have to sign up for a freaking marathon. In fact, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
And instead, you can purchase $30 set of stretch tubing and hang it in your doorway and do a couple minutes of exercises several days a week. And you can transform your body because you can get a really great workout in a few minutes.
Yeah, and I'm just sitting here thinking how good that must be for your mental health too, right? Like I just had screen fatigue about an hour ago. I was like, I need to move. Like my eyes were like falling closed. And I have the huge blessing of being able to do that.
Mm.
And so yes, doing those things and making it good for your physical health and your mental health all at the same time. And also, we just talked about how like there's no overnight successes in business and it's all the same, right? And it's been a theme in all the interviews I've done so far this year really about sustainability. And whether it's sustainability in business, sustainability in your nutrition, your health, your fitness, it really has been a theme that I've been very excited because again, like it's in business too, right? Like running so hard that we don't take any of those breaks is really not good for us or our businesses either. We all need breaks every once in a while. And to do like those micro things, right? That like what's the bump for today? What's the small improvement we can do today or this week and not always running at 1,000 miles an hour.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, Brad, if you could go back, I think you said your first book was in 1990 something. Is that what you said? So if you could go back, whatever that is, 30 years and give yourself one piece of advice, what would you do? What would you
Oh,
say?
mercy. I think I've taken it, so that's nice. I can think of some advice that I'd give that worked, and then also some that I might wish I'd given, which is, I think, the intent of your question. But
Yeah.
since I try to be a positive guy, the advice I took was I was kind of compelled. I was forced to go with my area of greatest interest and passion and pursue that as a career. And like I'm talking to my young adult son, and he's like trying to get some career strategy going and some fatherly guidance. And he's like, well, Dad, the thing about you is I can't fricking follow anything you did because your thing was so crazy and off the beaten path. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. I wish I'd handed over the keys to the hardware store to you and you could have your career. But I did what I felt like I had no choice because I just couldn't succumb to the pressures of, let's say, corporate America to line up and fall in line. I was too much of a rebel to do so. And so I think everyone has to answer to their deepest passions and interests and their calling, what their destiny is. And if it's to play ukulele, you're going to have some difficult economic aspects of that, but there are people that are playing and teaching ukulele that can make a good living, and same with anything like that. So
Yeah.
I don't want to discount that. But then on the flip side of that coin, the economic consequences of pursuing something that's off the beaten track are there in front of you every day, and that can turn into a challenge, especially when it affects your decision making and your freedom and all those kind of things. So if I had given myself advice 30 years ago, I would say, let's pay a little tiny bit more attention to the economic consequences of your decisions and where you're contributing to society, such as what you talked about earlier, people listening that might not be dialed in with their pricing and they're underpricing for their services. Let's spend a few minutes instead of just being a giving person where you're always send a free text to someone that you don't even coach anymore, but they just asked you, what do you think? Should I buy this bike or whatever? And you can kind of get a little more dialed in there, even though you don't want to be a greedy, profit-seeking freak show that you despise so much.
Yeah, I completely agree. As somebody who deals with money with clients every single day, we could talk about that one for a long time because there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And I mean, I just try to tell people like every decision you make, especially in business, really does have an economic impact, right? And so just not letting that make decisions for you, that's not the best way either, but letting it, I love what you said, just letting it let it be a consideration, right? When you're making those decisions. And so I really appreciate that from somebody who's been doing it for a long time, that you still see there are definitely places where we could have that influence our decisions a little bit more.
Yeah.
Well, Brad, it's been great chatting with you today. Is there anything that's come up in your mind as we've been chatting that you're like, oh, wait, I need to say that too?
No, I loved your questions. They
Okay.
really made me think. I usually never pause, but we had like a 5-second pause here, a 3-second pause there. So I love that you're doing this effort with your show, and hopefully people are getting a lot of value out of it. I'm sure they are.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think so. And we're getting some good feedback. So, like I said, I appreciate your time today. If people want to follow you, connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to bradkearns.com, Kearns, and I have these little set of PDF books you can download on a variety of fun health and fitness topics. And of course, the Be Rad podcast, wherever you can enjoy consuming podcast content. Really enjoy the show and have some great guests. And I do a lot of shows just myself talking in detail about a topic and giving practical advice. So it's a nice balance of feature length interviews as well as practical tips for diet, exercise, longevity, health, fitness, relationships, everything.
All the things. Awesome. Thank you so much, Brad. It was great to chat with you. And I will let you know when this is ready to go live.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Numbers. If today's conversation resonated with you, subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss a new episode every week. And if you're a health or wellness business owner who's ever wondered what's really going on behind your own numbers, I'd love to talk. Head to fitforprofit.com to learn more or book a complimentary clarity call. We'll see you next week.